and in government so that they can be aware of what is happening around the world. And it becomes as a result of these reports which are picked up by the press, they talk about it, governments and others are forced to acknowledge that there is a problem in their waters. And then they give the resources to the Coast Guard, to the navies, to the police to deal with it. And then begins the chain of response. So collecting the information is also very important. We think that the information should come non-governmental center such as the IMB, because we are not subject to Official Secrets Act or any other restrictions on the information that we put out. Everything that comes to us immediately goes out to the people who have to deal with it. And for those who are in government, they know that there are, for very good reasons, restrictions on what they can receive the information, but there are restrictions on what they can put out to the world outside, for very good reasons. So for that reason, a non-governmental piracy reporting center is vital. And it has resulted in the reduction of piracy attacks in places like the South China Seas, the Gulf of Tonkin, the Malacca Straits. We were one of the agencies which were involved in that. There were other reasons why that came down, one of which was the fact that Lloyd's of London threatened to increase the insurance premiums for vessels going through those waters at that time. And that was the catalyst for the response, which we now has been very successful in the Malacca Straits and in various other parts of the world. So all our reports are free of cost. Everything that we do has no charge at all to the ship owners, to the masters, whenever they need it. Now, where does it take place? If you go to our website, we have a live piracy map, and this is a little snapshot of it. In 2012, you can see that already we are now just 2 months into 2012, and you can see the number of attacks which are taking place around the world. The three key areas, starting with the least serious one, is in Southeast Asia. Then you have the attacks which are taking place in the Gulf of Guinea on the west coast of Africa, around the coasts of Nigeria, Benin, and Togo. And then, of course, you have this really challenging problem of piracy off the coast of Somalia. I'll try and deal very quickly with the first two and then spend the rest of my time looking at the problems of the east coast of Africa. So far, in 2012, 64 attacks, 6 vessels have been hijacked, 101 crew taken hostage, and 2 crew have been killed. I will tell you that in today's world, this is not acceptable. What is important to remember is that merchant seafarers do not sign on board a merchant ship to put themselves in the front line to face rocket-propelled grenades or automatic weapon fire from criminals and pirates, or to find themselves sitting on board a ship in Somalia for 7 to 8 months at a time, completely cut off from the rest of the world, under control of young, irresponsible Somalis who are on drugs and have got a weapon in their hand. This is not the reason why seafarers, merchant seafarers, go out to sea. So it is a very serious problem which needs our attention. So a quick look at the statistics, and you can see now how the attacks have gone on since 2003. In 2009, 10, and 11, we have seen a real peak in the number of attacks, all exceeding 400 attacks a year. And this year, of course, so far we have had 64. The hijackings, the vessels which have been hijacked correspond to the attacks, the trend with the attacks. And last year, 45 vessels hijacked and over 800 crew taken hostage. The different phases. So when we look at piracy generally, we are looking for I'm sure that this question will arise from the audience, the issue of definitions. When I speak about piracy, I'm talking about the phrase piracy and armed robbery. Piracy as defined under Article 101 of UNCLOS, and armed robbery as defined by the IMO in their circulars. So that is what I define. So with this phrase, piracy and armed robbery, it includes all the attacks which takes place upon the high seas. It includes the attacks which takes place within territorial waters. And remember, why are we addressing this problem? It is because of the seafarer, the captain on board a ship and his crew, who suddenly finds himself woken up in the middle of the night looking at the muzzle of a gun. And he is completely under the control of these people who have exercised sometimes very serious violence against him and his crew. That's why we are doing it. From his perspective, it does not matter at all whether the attack has taken place 400 miles out to sea in international waters or whether it has taken place in an anchorage inside the territorial waters of a country. The risk to him is exactly the same. And that is why we use the phrase piracy and armed robbery. And I'm very happy to accept any flack from you for any omissions that you may think we have caused by putting these things together. But don't forget the reason why we are addressing this problem. It is not to be used as an excuse not to deal with the attacks against the ships, wherever they take place. So the different faces of the attackers, like this one, a robber who has been caught on board a ship and now awaiting transport to the nearest police station ashore, to a gang of guys who stole vessels. I think one of our speakers later on will be talking about this very specific case, who hijack a ship in order to steal the ship and its cargo. To the issues of West Africa, which is driven by an insurgency movement there against the exploitation, as they see it, of the oil resources in the rivers and delta states of Nigeria. And finally, to the issues of the Somali pirates, who have suddenly found a financial model where they can get hold of a ship, hold the crew, and they know that for that crew they can get millions of dollars in ransom if they hold it long enough. So we have a range of the kind of attacks. They're after money, they're after stores, equipment that they can steal very quickly, they're after the cargoes which can be stolen from a ship, and the insurgency, and of course they are after the ships themselves of Somalia. And the outcome is violence against the crew, who are always the victims in this particular case. Some of these attacks may not be very serious. They may be the armed robbery attacks, but they take place in congested waters, often when a ship is underway. And for the duration of the attack, which may be 40 minutes to an hour, the vessel is not under its lawful command, because the captain and the people on the bridge are tied up or they are beaten up and they are unable to navigate the vessel properly. The ship is on autopilot. And it is quite possible that it could become the subject of a maritime casualty, a collision, a grounding, with all the environmental consequences that can flow from it. And finally, of course, the ultimate sanction. So now let's look at the first area, which is really the least one of our major concerns, Southeast Asia. And here we have had in the last, in 2012, 17 incidents with 14 vessels being boarded. The purpose of the boarding is purely to steal from the ship. But as I said, during the attack, the ship is often not under its lawful command. The time of the attack is usually from about 10 o'clock at night to around 2 o'clock in the morning. It's the range of the attack, so these are night attacks against the vessels. And the area of concern is Indonesia. They have brought the attacks right down. There are now random attacks against ships at anchor. This is not piracy. This is not the hijacking of ships. They get on board in order to steal what they can. If the crew come in their way, then they will use violence against the crew. And here is an example. I will not go particularly into it. Some pirates got into a ship. They tied up one of the people in the watch in the engine room. They stole valuables and left. This is the kind of attack you get. But the danger is that you're getting attacks against ships which are underway, approaching Horsburgh Light in the South China Sea, coming in off the islands of Mankai in the South China Sea. And it is a dangerous area. Every time we raise this issue, along with the other agencies involved, the Indonesians will come in, they put their Navy boats out there, and temporarily the problem goes down. When the Navy boats leave, after a few weeks, it resumes. That's the nature of crime. Which brings me now to the Gulf of Guinea, where you have much more serious types of attacks. There have been 7 attacks this year. There have been two deaths, one of which was a murder of the captain on board a ship. I'll talk about this incident. There is a vast amount of underreporting of incidents in West Africa. We think it is mainly because the ships which are being attacked are regularly going into these ports, and they fear reprisals. They fear administrative problems by the local authorities against the master and the ship. So they tend to solve the problems themselves. But that, I would submit, is the wrong way to go about it. It is only when there is international pressure upon the governments to take action that they will take action. Governments are like everyone else. You respond to the people who make the most noise and demand the resources. There is always less resources and more demands upon the resources. So it is in our interest to raise the issue. It's only when the issue is raised and when companies say that we are not going to invest in, let us say, a container berth in your port unless you do something to improve the security there, that is when the people wake up and they smell the coffee. And they say, we have got to do something about this problem.